I'll do. Now, yesterday I did a story on the head of the UK's FBI, the getting sacked basically for gross negligence. I believe she was speaking about secrets, although I didn't go too deeply into it in the story, and we probably won't find out about that for a long, long time due to obvious national security reasons. But I did mention in that story, and I've mentioned this in a few others, that I think part of the problem is that people are getting hired beyond their capabilities because they tick certain boxes. In her case, I do believe that she may have been put in that job because she's a woman. I could be wrong. I'm not completely convinced on that, but I've got suspicions that that may be the case. I do believe that Cressida absolutely was put into the job that as being in charge of the Met because she was a woman and I believe a lesbian as well. There's various other cases of this happening as well, and I think it's dangerous. And this story that I've got here, it's from earlier in last year, so I think it's. I'll just check the date. August 2023. And in the end of my video yesterday, I said the problem with box ticking in serious is that it's dangerous. In jobs like the nuclear industry or the military, things like that, it's so dangerous. And this is a story from Business Insider, and here's the title: Dangerously close near miss incidents across the US are a wake-up call to the aviation industry. Now, there has been a spate of very close near misses involving the aviation industry. And in fact, over Christmas, there was an aeroplane collision in Japan where a plane is, it's even over a week later, still hasn't been fully cleared up yet, with planes blowing up. And I think sort of around the beginning of 2023, maybe December, November 2022, there was around, I think it was, there was definitely one, there was possibly two people who were ground workers who got sucked into airplane engines in America. I'll link those, if I find them, I'll link them stories below. Absolutely awful. And again, it comes down to diversity hiring and hiring people, in my opinion, based on skin color. And in one, definitely in one of those stories where the people got sucked into an engine, the individual who unfortunately died had been repeatedly told to stay out of the exclusion zones and to stay away while the engines were running, and they just didn't listen. From how I read it, the person had a serious attitude problem, and the whole thing of I won't be told by anybody what to do, and unfortunately they paid with their life for it. So anyway, let's crack on with this. So a spike in near-miss events between commercial aircrafts in the US this year has rattled the general public. Federal Aviation Administration has created a safety review committee to comb through data and look for trends. New York Times cited a shortage of air traffic controllers as a significant factor in the string of close calls. And I do believe that that shortage of air traffic controllers will be down to the fact that they are hiring based on skin colour. And it's going to be a case of people who are applying and getting turned down for jobs because they don't tick the correct boxes. That's my interpretation of that. I could be wrong, but let's see if it explains anything. The US airline industry has narrowly avoided what could have been some of the worst disasters in its history, and for regulators, the incidents were too close for comfort. In mid-January, a Delta Airlines Boeing 737 was rolling for takeoff at New York's JFK International Airport when an American Airlines Boeing 777 crossed the same active runway, forcing the Delta plane to abruptly stop to avoid that collision. I mean, I don't know much about the capacity of those planes, but 737, 777, they're jumbo jets, they're huge. It's probably going to be in the region of 600, 700, possibly 800 passengers per plane. You could be talking nearly 2,000 people killed there. That is absolutely insane. And then there's the cost. You know, I believe these planes cost over £30 million each. You know, it's insane amounts of money that you're talking about here. And then there's the knock-on effect as well. You know, all the planes that be stuck in the air. But, you know, you could risk planes dropping out of the sky because they don't have enough fuel to find somewhere else to land. Absolutely insane that can happen. Here's another one. In early February, a FedEx Boeing 767 cargo jet nearly landed on top of a Southwest Boeing 737 airliner in Austin, Texas, coming within 100 feet of each other. Now, you might say, 100 feet, that's not very close. But when these planes are coming down to land, they're doing like 160 miles per hour, 180 miles an hour, possibly 200 miles an hour. These things are absolutely shooting across through the air, and they will cover 100 feet in a matter of seconds. It only takes a twitch of the wind and that plane can come down and hit the other plane. And without much inertia, because of the mass of these planes and the weight, it's like trying to turn a cargo ship around. Once that plane is going down, even if you correct it, it's going to carry on going down before it starts going up again. It's just basic physics. That is absolutely crazy. That's like driving past a lamppost and almost getting your wing mirror to tip it. Like 100 miles an hour. That is crazy close. A JetBlue Airways plane and a private jet then had a close call a few weeks later. These high profile events have been heavily reported on already, but safety data from the Federal Aviation Administration and analysed by New York Times suggest they are actually happening more than initially thought. According to the Times, at least 46 incidents occurred in July alone. That is crazy. 46 incidents where you could be talking, and all right, some of these may be cargo planes, but who cares? You know, it's still people on that plane flying it. You know, it's still people could die. And if it's passenger planes, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of people. This is wild that this is happening. Citing human error as a main factor in the near misses. Yeah, well, it's because of in my opinion, the diversity hiring. You're going to end up with even more human error because of it, including one in which two planes operated by Frontier Airlines and Southwest Airlines came within 100 feet. Some of the events are reminiscent of the deadliest plane crash ever, the tragic collision of two Boeing 747 jets in Tenerife, Spain in 1977 that killed 583 people. Is the history of the industry and doesn't want to repeat? Absolutely not. That's like the airline industry's Piper Alpha, really, with how bad that is. You know, that's awful. Since March, regulators and aviation professionals have come together to mitigate the concerns. Near-miss incidents, including the FFA's Tuesday announcement, they hold meetings at approximately 90 airports, right? Sharing information. Yeah, I want to see if just skip through some of this. The move will. Proximity to these recent events comes close aircraft. During breakout sessions at the safety summit, officials offered theories like inexperienced first officers and overworked air traffic controllers as contributing to the near disasters. I mean, that is going to be a big part of it as well. But again, we've got a serious shortage of staff and training happening in all sectors, and they think that they can migrate people over to fix this, but these are high skilled jobs, and you can't just bring people from other parts of the world to do these. This is all down to training and accepting people and getting people in as well. And unfortunately, and I don't know much about America, but it's in the UK we've got an oversupply of service sector jobs, and I've discussed this with people before. They talk about how we've got shortages of, say, truck drivers or bricklayers, or, you know, what you'd call like low-level jobs, semi-skilled low-level jobs. And people, well, nobody's filling them. It's like, well, no, of course. Why pay all the expense of learning to drive a truck and take on all the legal responsibility and risks when you're only going to get paid minimum wage to do it, and you can go sit in an air-conditioned office and not deal with traffic? Or why break your body bricklaying and getting paid essentially minimum wage when, again, you can go stack shelves in a supermarket and get paid £2 an hour more? You know, and I wonder if some of that's happening with this as well, where you've got people turning up wanting to do the work. It's crazy hours and they're not paying the money. And then on top of that, and I know for a fact in America this will be the case, they're going to be turning down people who are applying for these jobs as well because they aren't, again, ticking the boxes. So again, it's a knock-on effect with all of this as well. The Times pointed to the challenges surrounding air traffic controllers in particular as a root cause. Not only are a majority, now I believe the air traffic controllers, and I could be wrong here, but I think they get up to about 6 months of the year off because it's such a high stress job. They work that, it's, I know we're on the railway, when you have people working in the signal boxes, especially with like the really busy ones, say, I don't know, Birmingham New Street Station signal box. That signal box there literally just does the station. It's the station's that complicated and busy. And those guys do, I think it's an hour on, an hour off on their entire shift. So if they're on like an 8-hour shift, they're only technically working, I think it's 4 hours in that, because they're constantly off, having to go take a break. They've even got beds inside them because it's that stressful, the work. Your brain just can't keep going because when you're actually sat at the desk, you're non-stop thinking. You don't get to chat to people. You don't get to do anything like that. Just work. Very, very hard on the mind. Very stressful. Not only are a minority of ATC facilities not meeting staffing thresholds, but controllers are also facing fatiguing work schedules that could impact performance, potentially putting safety at risk. But tired employees are not the only concern. Airline pilot and aerospace expert Kathleen Banks told Insider that complacency could also be creeping in, especially since there has not been a mass casualty plane crash in the US since 2009. We've been in a stretch of historical, unprecedented safety. Well, that is absolutely fantastic news. That is what we want to hear from these industries. Same with the nuclear industry. You never want to hear of incidents from the nuclear industry. And it's the same with airplanes. You don't want to hear about incidents with them. You want them to be safe, and you don't, even near misses, really, you don't want. She said, and what that means is there can be a tendency for any system to get complacent when things are going so well. It's very true. Complacency is an absolute bugger for sneaking into things and people getting relaxed. Well, it's been all right for so long. You know, now when I was on the railway, there wasn't any complacency there with the people that I worked with. It was incredibly professional, and people's concerns were taken seriously as well. When issues were raised, things would happen. I can't speak for the entire railway, but at least where I worked, it was in that regard very, very professional, and I did enjoy doing that. Despite mounting concerns, runway incursions are statistically rare, considering millions of planes take off and land. I mean, that's a great point. I do agree with that, but unfortunately, the problem of what goes wrong and the outlay of what goes wrong is so massive. It doesn't matter that the statistics are very, very small. It's the actual impact of what happens. It's like car crashes happen regular, and I know this is, I don't want to sound callous, say, but when a car crashes, it's very, very small impact that it actually has on society as a whole. You know, obviously for the people involved, it's tragic, and for their families, absolutely awful. But for wider society, the ramifications aren't that big. If a plane drops out of the sky, the ramifications are huge, absolutely massive, and you can't avoid. You know, it has a huge, huge psychological impact. Same with a nuclear meltdown. You know, I mean, it only takes one with a nuclear meltdown, so you want them to have a 100% safety record with that. You know, same with railway. You know, if you've got a train traveling, 150 miles an hour, you know, you might say, well, how often does that happen? Well, you want it to be never, because the consequences of that machine having a catastrophic failure on the track is unthinkable. Because it's so massive. Again, statistically, tiny, but the psychological impact of it and the actual consequences of that incident is huge. So they're right in what they're saying. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm not even disagreeing with the principle of it, but I do think it's more complicated subject than just simply saying the statistics are okay, so we don't need to worry. It says here the overall rate per 1 million takeoffs and landings has been decreasing since 2021, and the 2020 pandemic lull, and currently sits below 2019 levels, though the number is likely to change by the end of the year. The most serious events, known as Cat A and Cat B incursions, were the highest in January at 1 per million takeoffs and landings, but fell to 0.2 in June. The lowest rate per FFA was the May with 0. That's what you want, 0. Now, I do know as well with the airline industry, for pilots, and I'll see if I can find it for the description below, there's been a massive drive for diversity in pilots as well, and they have been. There's pilot, I think a pilot agency. I've only read the article once, so I may be getting this wrong, but I think there's a pilot training agency, and they are or have been seen to be pushing only for. I think it's specifically just black female pilots to train, and then I suppose from their business point, it's selling the pilot onto a company once they've been trained up. But I do think this could lead to a lot more of these Cat A and Cat B incidences, because they're going to end up. It was like what happened with the US's first female fighter pilot. I think it was the US Navy, and she crashed a plane off the end of a aircraft carrier. I think it was a Super Hornet as well that she was flying. I'll see if I can find that and put that in the description as well. And it was tragic because she was promoted into a job beyond her capabilities. Now, fighter pilots are the best pilots in the world. You know, I mean, to be a pilot, you've got to be an exceptional individual anyway. And I doubt I would actually be good enough to be a pilot myself. But fighter pilots are the cream of the crop. And the cream of the crop of the cream of the crop, so to speak, the top 1% of the top 1% are the pilots who land onto aircraft carriers. You know, and I've heard it described as being like trying to land like trying to park a bus onto a postage stamp. You know, it's out in the ocean. You know, it's tiny until you're on it, and then all of a sudden it's there in front of you. You know, and so it's incredibly difficult. You know, landing a fighter plane, I imagine, is very difficult anyway. But to try and land it onto an aircraft carrier, when an aircraft carrier, don't forget, is on the sea, so it's not perfectly still. Even in calm waters, it's still moving. It's still going up and down. It's still going left and right. It's still going forwards and backwards a bit. It's a full oscillating movement that it's doing. Very, very difficult. It's got to be perfect. And unfortunately, she overshot the landing pad. I don't know. I think, is it called a runway on an aircraft carrier? I'm not so certain. But anyway, she overshot it. Plane went off the end, and into the soup she went. And unfortunately, she didn't make it. And I believe she was sacrificed on the altar of diversity, equity, and inclusion to try and make the US Navy look good. The FFA has since announced more than 100 million safety investments in 12 US airports to reduce runway incursions. Granted, Austin is one of. I mean, that's good that they're putting the money into it. Technology definitely has a part to play, and we'll probably start seeing a lot of AI technology going into these kinds of things as well. Although I don't know if it'll be able to handle air traffic controlling. I know that they can't. They've really struggled to get computers to be able to, and I think it's down to what mathematicians call the three-body problem. They do find it incredibly difficult, computers, to track multiple planes in the air, and it's something that still has to be done manually, I believe. I could be wrong now on that, it may have changed, but I do believe that it does take a lot of human input in regards to that. So TCAS, which alerts pilots to a possible collision, is one of the most critical safety systems in a cockpit and acts as another defence. Yeah. While technology is important, Brickhouse says humans are still essential to aviation safety. I totally agree with that. And I think part of that as well is because of the way these things move, because of how it's a constantly evolving situation. I think computers, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't be used, but they don't have that creative flair to be able to predict events which are almost unpredictable, which humans have a natural flair for doing, and which can only learn through experience, I guess. And again, I don't know if AI would be able to do that or not. Possibly would, but AI is not really creating anything new. AI is simply taking what already exists and amalgamating it together to create something that appears new but isn't. It's got some statistics here. So, despite the near disasters, the chances of being in a fatal air crash is about 1 in 11 million. Brilliant. Fantastic situation, although not as good as winning the lottery. You got less chance of winning a lottery. But if you're that person in that air crash, that's 1 in 11 million statistic means absolutely F all to you. You know, when you see the fuselage in front of you bursting into flames and you see the person next to you getting sucked out the hole, you know, that statistic's going to mean absolutely nothing to you, is it, at that time? So the Brickhouse emphasises it is still the safest mode of transportation. Yes, it is. And at the end of the day, all of the safeguards and redundancies, humans and technology have worked together to prevent an accident. If you successfully drive to the airport, the riskiest portion of your travel is pretty much behind you. Very true. He told Insiders aviation is still incredibly safe, even though we do have close calls from time to time, and everything did work out. Absolutely agree with that last bit. You know, it is the safest mode of transportation. It absolutely should be the safest mode of transportation. I mean, like I say, I'm ex-railway, and I did used to drive trains, and they are incredibly rigorous in the UK. In fact, the British railway system is more regulated than the nuclear industry. And a lot of people don't know that. It's unbelievably safe. However, there is less chance of wider impacts of damage from railway going wrong than from a plane going wrong. I mean, I can remember hearing a story about a train where the brakes had failed. We're talking a high-speed train, Pendolino train, doing about 130 miles an hour, and all the brakes locked on. But because of the way the track was going, the driver he was trying to do his brakes. He couldn't stop his brakes. All he could do was ring the signaller up and say, "Signaller, my brakes have stuck on, and I'm basically he's ice skating." And he just went for about 8 miles, just going. And at certain points, he was accelerating because he was going downhill. He was probably going faster than the train's actual engine speed would normally have been capable of doing, you know, for 8 miles. But as bad as that is, and luckily the disaster was averted from what this driver, how he explained it all to me. You know, nothing happened. Well, obviously, he's still alive. So, but if, say, the train had collided with something, it would only really be in a small area that would be affected by that train. As terrible as it would be for all the passengers on board, if it hits another train or whatever, you know, it would be terrible. However, when a plane crashes, a jumbo jet comes out, you know, if that falls out of the sky, you can be talking a mile of carnage behind it, you know, of just wreckage everywhere. You know, it's an absolute, it looks like a war zone's happened when a plane crashes. It is terrible, absolutely terrible, and it can land anywhere. You know, it could land in the heart of a busy city or anything. You just, you know, if it falls out of the sky and it goes wrong. So, yeah, I absolutely agree that air travel should be the safest form of travel of all of them. Anyway, I have witted on quite a bit there. I do think that these incidences are related to diversity promotion and hiring, although it doesn't mention that in there. I do think that we are going to start seeing more of these incidences coming out, and I just thought it was worth reading into that, because with the current political environment, I don't think it's a coincidence that these near misses and incidences are suddenly spiking. As I say, and don't be surprised if in the near future we start hearing reports coming out of this. As I say, I'll try and find those stories of the people getting sucked into the engines, and if I can, that report about the pilot training for only being for minorities for below, and people can please make your own mind up. Don't take what I'm saying. If you found that informative or you've enjoyed that in any way, shape, or form, or whatever, please like, subscribe, put a comment below. Goodbye.